I first met Lindsay Anderson in December 1967. I was rehearsing at the Royal Court Theatre a William Shakespeare play called Twelfth Night. It was modern dress version of it, very hip, was the 60s. Designed by Mr. Fish. Well, you can imagine what it was like. Quite hideous, but anyway, I was a little late for my appointment to go to this audition for this film. I didn't really know anything about it except that it was about a school. So I got there, I was late, I got there just as they were about to break for lunch. And I remember coming onto a stage similar to this. I couldn't see anything because there were lights, and I heard a voice say something like, "Turn around." So I thought, wow, is this a cattle call or something? But anyway, I did one of those. And then this man jumped up on the stage. He was quite short, about 5'7" or 8", I suppose. A little rotund, although, of course, I would never tell that to his face. He had very piercing, intelligent, and piercing eyes, quite amazing eyes, with a glint of sort of humor in them, too, and rather a sardonic mouth. He said, "I'm Lindsay Anderson. Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm Malcolm McDowell." And, "What are you doing?" "I'm doing this production at the Royal Court Theatre." Of course, I was quite proud of it, you know. I got to the Royal Court Theatre. That was a, very avant-garde theatre, and still is in London. And for a young actor to get there was, quite a feather in my cap. And he said, "And what are you doing?" I told him, Twelfth Night, modern dress. And he went, "Oh, God, it sounds awful." I said, "Really?" "Well, to be honest with you, I think it is rather awful, actually." But he went, "Who's directing it?" I told him. He said, "Oh, my God, she's so pretentious." I went, "Well, actually, you're quite right. It is a bit pretentious now that you come to mention it." Anyway, we had then a great gossip about this whole production, everybody in it, everybody connected with the Royal Court. He wanted to hear everything. And I'd sort of soon forgotten that I was supposed to be auditioning for him. So we had a great old gossip, because he loved to gossip, I don't mind it either, to be honest. You do realize, Malcolm, of course, that I am a director of the Royal Court. I said, no, Mr. Anderson, I didn't realize that. I suppose that's probably going to be the end of this role then, is it, for me? And he said, "Not necessarily." So that was it. I went off back to the theatre, back to this very pretentious production. And of course, it opened to glowing notices. It was jammed every night. And then I heard from my agent that indeed I'd impressed, and that I wasn't to take another job until I told them about it. So it meant that I'd sort of come up the ladder a bit, and I was being considered for the part. Very exciting. I mean, it could have been a Hammer horror film. I'd have been thrilled. But in the meantime, I've learnt about who this man, Lindsay Anderson, is. And I realize that I'm going to hopefully be working with one of the greats. Anyway, so I go back into the dressing room that we're in. There's 8 or 10 of us or something. And they go, "How did it go?" Oh, it went great. I'm close to it. I think I'm close to it. Anyway, every day this went on, I heard nothing for 2 weeks. So in the end, I just said, "No, I didn't get it." I got a call back. I was asked to go back, so I did. I went in there, and there was this girl. She was rather gorgeous. Dark hair, dark black eyes. Absolutely gorgeous. I had to do this scene with her, but unfortunately, I didn't have a script. Now, I hadn't been given a script, or there was some confusion about it, and they asked me then quickly to read it so I could do it with her. Well, I was far too nervous. I was reading stuff, but of course it was just sort of washing right over me. I couldn't actually take anything in. But anyway, I read it sort of, and I thought, I'll just wing it. Pretty much the way my whole career's gone, actually. We start reading, and we start doing it, and there's definite chemistry there, because I adore her immediately. I fall in love with this girl. We start, and I see written here, it says, Mick grabs hold of girl and kisses her passionately on the lips. So I had no problem doing that. So I reached across and kissed her, and in the sort of melee, our teeth banged together, and as I looked at her, I realized that there was blood coming. I wasn't sure whether it was hers or mine, but as it was pre-AIDS, it didn't really matter. The next thing I know is that I am on my ass on the floor. She reared up and hit me so hard that literally brought, well, I like to say my eyes were watering. In fact, I was crying like a baby. I didn't read the damn next line, is what I didn't do. Anyway, then there was a bit of, then I forget about the part. I stalked her around the stage. And she was throwing out lines. Of course, I didn't have a script, so I didn't know what I was saying. And it was animalistic, and it was amazing, and it was real, I suppose. And the next thing is, Lindsay said, thank you. Right, we'll let you know. So the writer, a wonderful fella called David Sherwin, who was about my age, I'm talking, I was 24, I think, and I looked like I was 16 or something. He said to me, if you had to choose some music, what would it be? And I thought, my God, this is sounding very good. Anyway, I go back to the theater. I'm doing my performance. As the curtain comes down, the stage manager's there and says, Malcolm, there's a phone call for you. Take it in my office. So hello, yes, me, yes, it's Malcolm. Hello, this is Miriam Brickman. Now, Miriam Brickman was the best casting director and the most famous one in London. I said, yes, Miriam. She said, congratulations, you are going to star in the next Lindsay Anderson film. I can tell you now, I have never in my professional career ever been happier than at that moment. When I got Clockwork Orange and all the rest, it paled compared to the first one. It's a magical moment. Anyway, I was so excited, and I rushed back to the dressing room to tell everyone, no one there, they'd all gone. Rushed to the pub, no one there. I ordered a bottle of champagne anyway. Thought maybe they'll be late, they'll come in. And the champagne comes, I open it, I pour a glass, I look around, I don't see any. And then there's someone I vaguely recognized. So I went over to him and said, I know you, don't I? He said, well, you should do. I play the guitar on the stage. I went, oh, yeah, of course, yeah. Sorry, I don't think we've actually met. I'm playing the worst part that Shakespeare ever wrote, so of course, Sebastian in Twelfth Night is the worst. And he said, well, I'm playing the guitar, so at least you've got one up on me. I said, well, here, glass of champagne, we are toasting my success of being, in this film with Lindsay Anderson. Now, the next morning, I had to go and meet Lindsay. I had to go round to his flat, 57 Greencroft Gardens. It was very mid-European. There was lots of strange East European restaurants, which, of course, Lindsay loved. And the first thing I see, I ring the bell, there's no answer. So I walk through the little front garden, and I stand at the end of by the gate, looking down the street, and I see this man, who I recognize as Lindsay, in an anorak, holding 2 tins of kerosene for his, to light his fire in the... So, of course, I rush down, I help him with the stuff, we fill his fires and stuff, and then he says, well, I said, anything you can tell me? And he goes, not really. He said, my first image, really, Malcolm, for you is you riding on a motorcycle with the girl like this on the back. And that was my first image of the film that I was about to do with him, which, of course, became a huge success and started my career. So I'd like to read you now a piece that David Sherwin, our writer, wrote in his diary about that very same scene. He calls it the best audition in the world. That's what I call it too. The scene, a revolving slapstick stage in Jimmy Edwards' comedy playhouse plus props. This audition is make or break. No room for error. A script can be rewritten, a shot repeated 100 times, but the wrong actor and the film will die. Our struggle for perfection will be down the drain. The revolving stage is still. Lindsay chats, relaxing the hopefuls. They are to play the most demanding scene in the film, the scene in which Mick makes love to the greasy spoon cafe waitress. The first girl is late. The second girl is called. She steps forward from the wings, small, dark-haired, a touch of the gypsy. The actor who is auditioning for Mick calls out that someone's nicked his script and he hasn't had time to learn the scene. Why not? Lindsay asks acidly. Well, I only heard of the job yesterday. A script, for God's sake, someone. There aren't any scripts. We could only afford to get 50 printed. I climb up on the stage and give him mine. He says thank you blandly. He's obviously too smooth for the part. No chance, poor chap. The nobody quickly scans the scene, then walks onto the stage holding his script. He explores Jimmy Edwards' props with sudden, intense eyes. His movements are precise, yet natural. He approaches the girl who stands behind a table, our pretend cafe counter. He raps on the table. He ogles her as she mimes pouring coffee. Then, without warning, not looking at the script, he grabs around the neck, pulling her across the wide table, and kisses her hard and long. He looks at her, smirking, as she lies half off the table. The actor picks up his script to find out the next action, when, without warning, the girl rears up and smashes him in the face with her fist. Fist. He reels across the stage, hurt and shocked. What's happening? He studies his script again, goes to a bookshelf and works it like a jukebox. Go on. Look at me, says the girl. Look at my eyes. My eyes are like a tiger. They get bigger and bigger.
Look at my eyes. Sometimes I stand in front of the mirror and my eyes get bigger and bigger. And I'm like a tiger. I like tigers.
The actor smells the girl. They're animals. What's happening? Bites, blows, bodies thumping on the boards, struggling on the floor. He tries to turn the next page to see what's coming next. The girl tears into him, tugging out his hair, ripping the script in two. Maddened, he retaliates, wrestling, breaking the girl's bra under her sweater. An accident? The jukebox has finished, Lindsay calls to break the battle. The actress gives a final blow and a shriek of laughter. The actor rolls in pain. I go to the stage, pick up my shredded script, and call across to Lindsay. I wouldn't bother going on auditioning, Lindsay. You've got your Mick and the girl. Oh, you wouldn't bother, would you, Sherwin? Well, that's a brilliant way to cast a film. Piss off. I repeat, well, they're brilliant. Then fucking well tell them. Their names are Malcolm McDowell and Christine Noonan. Christine has vanished, but I asked Malcolm how he acted the fight so brilliantly. Malcolm replies with his James Cagney grin. Oh, I only looked at my lines, typical actor. I didn't know I was going to get knocked out just for kissing her. I was absolutely stunned. And then I thought, right, I'll give it her right back. And so, a star is born. After casting Malcolm and Christine, Lindsay and casting director Miriam Brickman and I rush back to Memorial, that's the production offices, and the last vital character has to be cast by this evening, Robert Roundtree, the sadistic head of class. Lindsay and I go up in one lift, Miriam in another. She never arrives. The lift breaks down. "Do you realize, David," says Lindsay, "this is what making films is all about. Miriam Brickman trapped in Albert Finney's lift, perhaps forever." Actually, Albert Finney is very important to my life and career because even though I really don't know him that well, I remember seeing Albert Finney when I'm from Liverpool and he's from Salford, which is very close in England, in the north of England. And I remember being in the Odeon in Lime Street, Liverpool, watching Albert Finney in Saturday night and Sunday morning and thinking, I could do that. So Albert, thank you. When we actually came to shoot this scene of the greasy spoon cafe waitress, we actually shot it off a road called the A3 or something, and it was a real greasy spoon. And, you know, it's a truck driver's stop. And I fell in love with Christine Noonan, there's no question about that. I would ask her, you know, I had to come for a coffee. She'd look at me, she had a sort of Cockney twang. No, I wouldn't. No, you don't interest me at all. So, well, how about a little dinner, you know? Are you joking? No, not at all. I said, look, you know, this uniform is, I'm not a schoolboy. I'm an actor. This is a uniform, for God's sake. Costume. This is costume. I came in jeans and a sweater. No, I don't. No. So we're doing this bit where we're doing all this animal stuff, and I sidle over to Lindsay and I said, wouldn't it be kind of fantastic if, you know, you cut, we're on the floor rolling around and we're naked? He looked at me and he said, you ask her. Christine, Lindsay wants to know whether you'd be prepared to do this naked. I don't mind. Oh, really? Oh. Don't mind. So we come to do it. She comes out in her dressing gown. Off. Oh, my God. Come on, Malcolm, get your pants off. Well... It's difficult for a man. You hang on. And it's a dirty floor, you know. Come on, hurry up, get on with it, for God's sake. We do the shot. Oh my God, I'm telling you now, it was a waste of time, the ploy, because I didn't see a thing. I was so terrified. It was the most asexual thing that could ever happen to anybody. I stood up at the end, and I see on these trucks parked outside, lined up with truck drivers going, ah. My first day on IF was shooting a fencing scene that I'd, you know, been taught by the stuntmen and all this, and went on forever. We were in a squash court, and it was the three of us fencing away and swinging on ropes in the school gym and the whole deal. Anyway, we shot it, and it was kind of a good way to start because we just had throwaway dialogue, and it was quite easy to do. And the next day, I went to see the dailies with Lindsay. He took me under his wing, and he said, come on, we'll go see what they look like. And of course, I see this thing, and I'm totally mortified. I was so bad. I was sort of reacting, you know, realistically to a sword fight, and I'm going, oh God, my mouth's open, my tongue's hanging out. Oh God, Lindsay, I've got to reach. He said, now look, that's a good lesson for you. He said, when you're acting, you have to be aware of every single facet of your face and all your movement. I mean, that is a good... I said, can we reshoot it then? No, we can't. Of course we can't. We haven't got the money. We're going to have to cut around it, but it'll be fine. I won't choose any takes with you with your tongue hanging out. Thank you. So he became... Lindsay, to me, became a mentor, I suppose. I don't know. I just found him so much fun. I mean, we'd have dinner and he'd say, all right, name 2 films that Jean Arthur starred in. I go, 2? Okay. Well, I know he was a very good... Not he, her, you idiot. Jean Arthur, is this a woman? Yes, it is. A brilliant comedy actress from the 40s. Now, she was in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. Now, that's 2. And then he'd take me to the National Film Theatre to see these movies. And he introduced me to John Ford. And what an education I had from this man. I mean, he said, look, if you're going to work in movies, you better know something about them. Now, he loved particularly American film. And I mean American film of the 40s, the 30s, 40s, and the 50s, the John Ford era. He loved John Ford. In fact, Lindsay wrote a book about him, and it's called About John Ford, and I think it is one of the best books from one director about another. And I asked him once, I said, Lindsay, why do you love John Ford so much? What makes him such an extraordinary director? He said, well, Malcolm, there are many great directors, very few poets. John Ford was both. Same with Lindsay Anderson. I got the film, and it was about a revolution in a boys' school. Now, the boys' school, it's a public school in England, which is a private school here. The public school was brought into being in England primarily, I think, to educate and send out administrators for the empire. There was tremendous tradition, you know, Eton, Harrow, and all that we've heard of, but there are many, many public schools in England. I myself went to a very minor one, as Lindsay often pointed out. Yes, Malcolm, yours was rather minor, wasn't it? Well, it was quite minor, but it's quite good, actually. But Lindsay went to a school called Cheltenham College. Cheltenham College, he bamboozled the headmaster into agreeing to be able to shoot the film down there. So all these beautiful shots of the college were, in fact, the real school that Lindsay went to, and he was an old Cheltonian, they're called. And of course, he gave the headmaster a fake script, so there wasn't this, you know, great shooting scene a la Columbine at the end. So, of course, the headmaster was pissed off when he saw the film eventually. In fact, he sent Lindsay a letter which was unopened on his mantelpiece for at least 7 years. I got a call from Lindsay, I think the day that the film opened. And he said, Malcolm is very excited. Come down to the plaza on the Haymarket, and come down right now. Where are you? I said, I'm over at my parents'. He said, come on, hurry. So my father drove me there. And we drove up the Haymarket, and there was this line of people. And I went, my God, they must be lining up for the Odeon. What's on at the Odeon? Some piece of crap. I didn't know that was a hit. The thing went right past the Odeon and all the way to the plaza. And Lindsay was standing right on outside the cinema in his anorak and the whole thing. And I came out and he went, this is for us. We're a hit. I knew that I had a sort of inkling that things were going to be good, because I walked down the King's Road and a rather beautiful girl passed me, shrieked, came back, and put her arms around me. And I'm, well, hello? Do we know each other? I don't think so. She said, I saw your film. Oh, my God. And I said, what film? If. Oh, you saw it. Oh, my God. Oh, it's brilliant. Because in England, of course, this film stuck a knife at the heart of the establishment. But of course, the establishment in England is very well versed at dealing with rebels. They're so brilliant, in fact, that they showed the film at every public school in England. And really, when you look at it, only a man who loved his school could have made that film. And the next thing was we went to the Cannes Film Festival, which meant a lot to Lindsay because he'd been a critic. And he used to cover the Cannes Film Festival with the Variety critic, a wonderful man called Gene Moskowitz. And when they got together, it was great banter about, you know, who was the cameraman of Grapes of Wrath? Who was this? Who was that? And all that would go on. We're at Cannes. We're walking down the Croisette. We have won the major prize, the Palme d'Or. And he is so happy. So happy. The place went nuts for this film. And I found myself on the Carlton Terrace of this 5-star hotel. Everything paid for, of course. I hadn't got a bean. I was only paid £90 a week for the film. And I hadn't worked since. In fact, Lindsay had to loan me a few pounds to sort of tide me over. And in fact, he allowed me to paint his kitchen and bathroom. He gave me £20 for the pleasure. I'm at the Carlton, and I'm sitting there with these English stiff upper lips. And I noticed another table where they seem to be having a bit of fun. So I smooch over there, and I introduced myself to Dennis Hopper, Jack Nicholson, Peter Fonda, who didn't know who the hell they were. And I said, what is that you're smoking? Really? Oh, that's rather good. Yes, lovely. Wow. And the joke was that Jack and I were sort of co-hot favorites to win the Best Acting prize. Of course, neither of us won it. All I do know is that if it hadn't have been for this wonderful American director, Stanley Donen, we wouldn't have won the Grand Prix. Because, as Stanley told us later, all the jurors went out to Sam Spiegel's yacht that was parked in the harbor to have a show of hands and to cast their votes and everything. If came in third on the first ballot. And the other great film that year was Costa Gavras' film called Z, which was an incredible film, actually. Then there was a Swedish film that nobody's ever heard of, nor will they ever again. But the compromise vote went to If. And, of course, we didn't know that at the time, but Lindsay loved him from that day on. Loved everything Stanley Donen. Have you seen this, Malcolm? Directed by our friend Stanley Donen. Oh, Singing in the Rain, right? Absolutely brilliant. He's one of the greatest directors working in Hollywood. Oh, yes, he is. He certainly is. So we're walking down the Croisette, and I said to Lindsay, you know, Linz, you and I are a very good team. I said, really? Come on, let's face it. I mean, I had a nerve, really, the nerve of youth. He looked at me, yes, Malcolm. I said, look, come on, let's do another film together. He stopped, his eyes rolled in his head. He said, look, Malcolm, if you want to do another film with me, then you'd better write it. So I said, all right, and he walked off. I said, I bloody well will. I'll write it. And so I did. I went back to London, and I started to write my experiences as a coffee salesman. So between leaving school and being an actor, I somehow got involved in selling coffee in Yorkshire, where they only drink tea. I wrote all this down. I got 40 pages, and I thought it was quite good. You know, I really did. And it was like pulling teeth. If you're an actor and you don't know how to write, I mean, it's tough. I did it. because I wanted to work with him. I knew he was the master. I took it round to Greencroft Gardens. He took it. He said, he read the first page. He looked at me and he said, "Is this supposed to be funny?" I said, "Look, you know, I'm from the north of England. I have a sense of humor, Lindsay. I mean, you're from the south. You wouldn't understand that." He said, "I'm actually a Scot." I said, "Oh." "Well, you've never been to Scotland. Anyway, you're only a Scot when the bill comes at the end of the meal." He read it, the 40 pages, huffing, puffing, sighing, rolling the eyes, the whole thing. He put it down, he looked at me and he said, "Malcolm, it's not very good, is it?" I said, "Yes, it is, and it's going to be your next bloody film." He said, "Is it? All right. Well, then you'd better call David Sherwin, who was the writer of If." So I called David. See, I needed to hook him. I needed to get him. I knew the stuff was basically crap, but I needed to get him. David comes over. He reads it. He came out and he said, "Malcolm, this is bloody brilliant. It's so funny." I went, "You must be from the north." "Yes, oh yes, yeah. Great. This is fantastic. Oh no, we can really work on this. Oh, I'm dropping my other stuff. This is fantastic. Coffee Man. Coffee Man. Brilliant." So for the next 6 months, we worked on it. In pubs, in coffee bars, pounding the stuff out. And I soon realized that both of us, David and I, could not go to Lindsay to present a scene because he thought we were ganging up and he would throw it out. So after a couple of times of that, just like Pavlov and his dogs, I decided, "David, you go in with this scene and I'll go in with this one. Let's see how that works." Of course, got him passed. Ticked, 10 out of 10. No problem. I said to David, "You know, David, talking about this script, Coffee Man, let's face it, it's kind of pathetic, isn't it? Coffee Man. I mean, it's not really a catchy title. It sounds like it's Carry On Up the Khyber or something. Can't we think of anything better than that?" He said, I said, "Well, you know, what is this film about?" And he says, "Well, I don't know, success and luck and luck. That's it. Lucky Man. Lucky Man. That's brilliant. Let's go to Lindsay right now, both of us." We broke the rule, the cardinal rule. We rushed over to Lindsay's, pounding on his door, walked in. He's going, "What on earth are you doing?" "Look, I said, "Sit down, Lindsay. I'm going to whisper the title of your next film in your ear, and I want it just to permeate down through your body." He said, "For God's sake, shut up, Malcolm, and get on with it." I said, "Sit down." I went on, "Lucky Man." He looked down that senatorial nose. "Oh, lucky man." Yeah, brilliant. My God, he had to be the director to the end. We love him for it. He was right, because it made it epic. If you worked with Lindsay, there was a vocabulary that went with it. And it was something like mini. If it was mini, it was unimportant and basically rubbish. Probably realistic, not interesting, not layered. Epic was layered, important, poetic. So there we had it. We had the mini and the epic, and Oh Lucky Man was epic. You know, I didn't write the film. I would never claim that. I just started the seeds and poured a little water on it and let it sort of grow. And of course, the hand of God was over everything, on everything that he did. It was always, he was a genuine auteur, but he wouldn't write it himself. It was interesting, he would always dictate and push in an area, but he didn't want to write it. And David Sherwin would come up with the most extraordinary lines, I think. For instance, in the film, Ralph Richardson says two, I think, memorable lines. try not to die like a dog. And the other one is, watch out for her treacle tart. There's many a fly got stuck in that. I had quite a good one myself. When I was working in this coffee company, which was called Chase and Sanborn, it was an American company. The catering manageress actually said to me, now look here, Malcolm, remember this, you'll be a failure in catering unless you know what to do with your leftovers. I remember saying to Lindsay, well, Lindsay, about the ending, you know, how the hell am I going to end this film? I've really no idea how I'm going to end it. Any ideas? He said, look, Malcolm, what happened to you? I said, what do you mean? Well, I became a movie star, I suppose. He said, that's how we end it. Now, Lindsay played the part of the director at the end of Oh Lucky Man. And this is a little piece from his diary about shooting that scene. Oh Lucky Man audition, Lindsay's diary. This is entry for 3 days. June 16th, 1972. Today we shoot the audition. I played my part for good or ill. We tried to shoot the smile. And not surprisingly, at the end of an exhausting day, we failed. The sequence may be regarded as the heart of the film. The dialogue with the director is not cynical, at least it isn't intended to be so. It is intended far more to challenge Mick, and therefore the audience, with the proposition that maturity and understanding is only to be achieved when we can look the facts of life directly in the face, not obscured by materialist or by sentimental illusion. A touch of Zen, you might say. June 17th. The whole end of the scene won't do. Malcolm should have worn makeup, should have played much more out of desperation in the gutter, didn't play the smile scene with enough despair. This had been Jocelyn's point, apparently, but Malcolm stopped her speaking to me, and she, I suppose, had this attitude of, well, whenever I say anything, you tell me I'm wrong. Of course, Jocelyn Herbert was Lindsay Anderson's muse. She was the designer of all his films and the most remarkable woman I think I've ever met. And Jocelyn really was the one that he went to sound off on, and they had the most alarming rows. He'd always say things like, oh, Jocelyn, you're just a monument to good taste, and say it with such a snarl. And what's wrong with a bit of good taste anyway? Oh, God, it's awful. He used to love that word, awful. He goes on. I seem okay. Good? I don't know. I think so. But I fear the sequence insufficiently poetic. I should have checked the setups, framing too high for my taste. The final smile remains an unsolved problem. How am I going to shoot this final sequence? That's good. I'm wearing too much makeup, and he's good. June 18th. The call had to be switched from 10 a.m. to 9 a.m., and when Malcolm walked on the floor, I sensed something wrong. He hadn't seen the rushes, and he hadn't had his new call till 7:30. And he'd been to bed late after being out all afternoon playing cricket for Harold Pinter's 11. You don't want to play cricket with Harold Pinter. Poor Malcolm, I understood. We did the reshooting, and I fear it will never be what I envisage. I think we did get better setups, and we did get the wide dialogue with more depth behind it. We even did a couple of hits and smiles.
Now smile.
I beg your pardon?
Smile.
Why?
Just do it.
I'm afraid I can't smile without a reason.
I shan't soon forget the sight of Arthur Lowe over at the corner of the room having to wait while I was bashing poor Malcolm on the head with my script.
Smile.
What's there to smile about?
Just do it.
Why?
Don't ask why.
What's there to smile about?
At least it illuminated how the smile has to be achieved. Ridiculous, in fact, and terribly shallow of me to have thought it adequate just for poor Malk to explode into enlightenment. But we'll have to go back to this, however difficult Mirek, that's our cameraman, says it is to match. Maybe a hypnotist. Malcolm is very game. Well, he hit me 35 times with that script, and we used the third take. To celebrate the starting of the filming of Oh Lucky Man, we had a great party at Jocelyn Herbert's. It was called St. Andrew's Farm. It was a very beautiful, very unpretentious, small farmhouse in Hampshire. Jocelyn had decided to get with it with all the young people that were coming down, a block of hashish. And my sister Gloria had volunteered to bake some brownies. You know, she baked the brownies and all the rest of it. We went down there. We were having so much fun, playing French cricket and just absolutely incredible. And Alan Price was there with his band, and everybody was invited. And Lindsay was in the kitchen, I remember, talking. So I went in and said, "Have you had a brownie yet, Lindsay?" He goes, "No, I don't." "I don't know, you've got to try them. Gloria made them specially." He said, "Oh, all right, I'll have one." He said, "What are you looking at, grinning like an idiot?" I said, "Oh, no, I'm not grinning. I've had one." He said, "Oh, have you? All right." He had one. I went off, played a bit more cricket, came in. I said, "How was that brownie?" He said, "Oh, shut up, Malcolm. What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, you haven't stopped talking for 5 hours. It was laced with hashish." And then Alan Price came in and he goes, "Hey, you're stoned, man. You're stoned." He was from the northeast of England. "Yeah, man, you're stoned. You're really stoned." He goes, "I am not stoned at all. And I don't believe there was hashish in any of those brownies." I said, "Absolutely there were. I cannot feel my feet." Anyway, that's the way we started the film. There was a group of us around Lindsay. We used to call ourselves the old crowd. One of my favorites was this wonderful actress called Rachel Roberts. She was very delightful and adorable, and I loved her dearly. And unfortunately, she was what they call, I suppose today, bipolar. She had tried many times to commit suicide, and eventually, of course, she succeeded, sadly. Lindsay tried so hard with Rachel. He just adored her, and he even had her over to clean his flat, you know, to give her something to do, physical work. And she came over. She was a movie star. She had the dark glasses and a fur coat, and she was doing a bit of that. God, Rachel, she was just a beautiful person. This is a piece that Lindsay wrote about her when her then husband, Alan Doby, who was an actor, was acting in my production of Sergeant Musgrave's Dance at the Royal Court. In the program notes about the cast, I'd written that Alan was married to the actress Rachel Roberts. Rachel was outside the theatre before the first preview. Leafing through the program, she shrieked delightedly when she saw her name. "The actress, Rachel Roberts! The actress!" I recognized and immediately warmed to her joyous mixture of send-up, self-send-up, and huge, astonished pleasure. That was Rachel, ardent and outrageous, in the days before awards and fame and recognition by taxi drivers. She was simpler then and happier. That was before my friend Carol Rice, with such brilliant perception, cast her as the thwarted Brenda in Saturday Night and Sunday Morning. Rachel showed in that how she could respond when her material and her direction were first class. She was a terrific actress. She would dare anything. Her emotional power could be frightening, self-lacerating. At first, I doubted that she was right for bitter, walled-up Mrs. Hammond in This Sporting Life. But it was exactly the pressure of violent temperament under implacable control that created that unforgettable performance. Rachel, of course, was not English. She was a Celt. Totally Welsh. And of all the Celts, it is the Welsh who find it most difficult to deal with the cool of the Anglo-Saxons, their unquestioning assumption of superiority, their distaste for temperament. The English theatre could not accommodate Rachel, nor could the English cinema. She scared them. And then she had to fall for Rex Harrison, who brought with him all that establishment charm and class, all that champagne and caviar and shirts from Jermyn Street. Everything that wasn't Rachel, for which she obstinately insisted on aspiring. When she was young, she wanted to look like Hedy Lamarr. She had such distinction in the little black dress I would try to make her wear, but she never lost her yearning for fishnet tights. We tried to stop her, Rachel, but we couldn't. She would sometimes say, I wish you'd known me earlier. I was good fun then, not all messed up the way I am now. She was messed up. And none of us, friends and hangers-on and foolish doctors alike, could pull her out of it. And yet, what laughs we had. She was one of life's incandescents, irreplaceable. We entered Oh Lucky Man at the Cannes Film Festival. Again, we were gluttons for punishment. And by this time, of course, we were past winners and rather important. So we were staying at the Cullum d'Or Hotel, which is this magnificent place up behind Cannes, up in the hills in a little town called Saint-Paul-de-Vence. And it's famous for being the place where Picasso doodled on napkins and menus to pay for his meals when he was in his 20s or something. And they've got them stuck all over the place. Matisse, too. So there's Alan Price, myself, Helen Mirren, who was in the film, and her boyfriend, some prince, Russian prince. Lindsay, of course, Michael Medwin, the producer. And we've taken a big table in the restaurant, and we're being frightfully noisy and scaring everybody away, and it was all great fun. Rachel was late. She'd come in, of course she'd been drinking. She came in, and she was absolutely white, and sort of her hair was back. She looked very severe, like a sort of headmistress or something. And she sat down, and Lindsay looked at her and sort of said, now what is the matter, Rachel? She said, I've just talked to Hal Prince. He's offered me a musical on Broadway, Linz. And started crying. He said, what on earth are you crying for? He's offered you the part. She goes, I've got to sing for him. I don't know how to sing, Linz. And so he looked at Alan and he said, just tell her how to, he said, you do it like you're on the phone. Do it like you're on the phone. She goes, oh, Lindsay. With that, she jumped up on the table at the Cullum d'Or in the middle of the dining room. Luckily, there wasn't too many people around. Now, previous to this, she'd been filming a love scene with Stanley Baker, and apparently had to clip some of her hair on her privates. She leapt on the table, lifted her skirt. She, of course, was not wearing underwear, and said, this is what I did for fucking Stanley Baker. We all looked and I went, my God. Lindsay said, for God's sake, Rachel, pull yourself together. You look like a bald porcupine. At that moment, Catherine Deneuve swans in, the most beautiful woman on the planet. Rach goes, oh my God, I love her. I want to fuck her. And I went, Rach, I didn't know you were a lesbian. I'm not! not a lesbian, but I want to fuck her. When we first showed Oh Lucky Man to the brass at Warner Brothers, the film was rather long, they'd seen it, and we all rushed out to the men's room and were standing in a line. I'm standing there, John Calley stands next to me, and he goes, Malcolm, I gotta tell you. He goes, that film is a masterpiece. It's better than Clockwork. I went, wow, oh my God. Wait till I tell Lindsay this. He goes, it's one of the greatest films that we've ever done at Warner Brothers. I'll tell you that right now. Right, boom. Off we go to Cannes. We think we've got the backing of Warner Brothers, which we had, but the film was rather long, to be honest. It was 2 hours and 40 minutes or 50 minutes or something. But as Lindsay said, I mean, do you tell Goya how big his canvas can be? I was told by Ted Ashley, the head of the company, that unless you got Lindsay to cut that film, we're not going to release it in the States. Oh. I said, I'll tell him, Ted. We'll cut it. So I come out of the Carlton Hotel, the same wretched hotel, cross the Croisette, look down on the beach, and there is the great man surrounded by 30 or 40 journalists who are eating out of his hand. I look down and think, oh my God, in a few minutes' time, you're not going to be quite so composed when I tell you the film is doomed. So anyway, I grab hold of him. He said, no, he started to sort of belittle me in front of all his, I said, Lindsay, I need to talk to you. He said, they're not going to release the film. He just stalked off and walked down the beach. Didn't even look. Off, gone. He came back. I sat there, had a drink or something, came back, and he said, Malcolm, you tell Ted Ashley, if he wants to cut the film, then go ahead, he can cut it. I'd like to see what he does with it. I went, wow, that's quite a good ploy. So I go to see Ted Ashley. I said, Ted, Lindsay says, okay, if you want to cut the film, then you cut it. He said, really? He said that? I said, that's what he said. You cut it. In the meantime, we'll look for cuts. So we go back to England, and we had a screening just for Lindsay, myself, Michael Medwin, the producer, and Alan Price, the musician. So we're sitting there, and just by chance, the projectionist dropped reel 9. He went from 8 to 10. I leaped up and went, brilliant cut! Great, Linz! He went, don't be such a fucking idiot. That's not a cut. That idiot, stop the thing. He's looking for the, stop it, stop, all right. So he grinds so high, no, that was brilliant. I didn't even know. I mean, it's only 10 minutes, but it's enough. Let's do it. And Alan Price says, I don't know. He goes, but I'm losing a song, man. I'm losing a song. I went, losing a song? I'm losing 5 scenes. Rachel's losing her suicide. But come on, let's get the film shown. So he begrudgingly dropped reel 9. And here's a postscript to that, is that I was in Hollywood, oh God, a few years later in 1979, doing a film with Mary Steenburgen. We were doing Time After Time, a wonderful film. I got this call from Lindsay. Now, Lindsay never called long distance, ever. So I knew that it was an emergency of some kind. And the emergency was, I had to go and look at reel 9 that he'd talked to showing and putting back into the film. The problem was that they'd lost the negative, so they had to do a dupe negative, and if you see it, it sort of looks a little grainy. But he goes, I love that about it, and he goes, art, sometimes it's really a very happy accident. Lindsay's first film was called This Sporting Life. It's notable not only for Rachel's fine performance, but for, I think, the greatest performance by a British actor in post-war film in England, by Richard Harris. A diary entry, April the 23rd, 1962. 5 weeks into This Sporting Life, and I should, of course, have been keeping a record of it, the most alarming experience of my life in so many ways. The most striking feature of it all, I suppose, has been the splendor and the misery of my work and relationship with Richard. I think that his performance is marvelous. Certainly his acting with a strength and a simplicity that I've never seen from him before on the screen. I've grown to love him dearly. Too dearly, of course, with the result that I lack absolutely the detachment that would allow me to weather the storms of his temperament without suffering. These have been fierce and shattering. First, in Wakefield, the night he insisted on getting drunk with Colin Blakely. And the awful finale when he went mad after the Wigan match and announced that he would not come back to London with us. Then the first terrible day of rehearsals with Rachel, which I suppose was his last resistance against playing the part without the protection of his mannerisms. All of these were climaxed by the evening meeting in his flat with Carol Rice, who was the producer, and myself when he shouted, "Cunt!" at me because I wouldn't argue any further about the check scene.
Go on, have a guess. Just guess how much you think I'm worth.
Threepence?
Oh, careful, careful. We made a joke. You can't go on cracking jokes like that. You know you might do yourself an injury. Oh, come on, have a guess. Come on.
No.
Well, I better tell you since you're so keen. £1,000.
Oh. You're a great ape.
You don't believe me? Look, I've got the check here in my pocket. £1,000 in letters and in numbers. Signed, sealed and delivered, Frank Mershon. They drove me home in their car. A bloody Bentley.
It's very good.
You don't sound very excited about it.
It's a bit more than I got when my husband died.
Well, isn't that right bloody handsome of you?
You didn't have to do anything for it.
You mean I didn't have to get killed for it?
Some people have life made for them.
That's right, Mrs. Hammond, and some people make it for themselves. It's about time you took that ton of rock off your shoulders. And don't wake me in the morning, I might be dead.
And then my special birthday present, his refusal to shoot the close shot with the fur coat because he'd been accused of holding us up by being late. This is a personality too big for me to cope with. Emotionally, his warmth and willfulness can sabotage me in a moment. And of course, instinctively, he knows this and exploits it. I ought to be calm and detached with him. Instead, I'm impulsive, affectionate, infinitely susceptible. We embrace and fight like lovers. But in Richard, I sense the ruthlessness that would drop me or destroy me without compunction if I seemed to fail him. The familiar combination, I suppose, of pride and insecurity, of sensibility and egoism, the inescapable egoism of a star. How can I be expected to resist? Whether he is embracing me physically like some big warm dog or ordering me to heel, I am at his service completely, which of course means that I'm unable at times to serve him as I really should, conniving at his self-indulgence where I should be calmly, coolly resisting it. I'll say this, and in a year we shall see if I am too skeptical. I cannot really believe that our paths lie together. This would imply a good fortune that I can't any longer believe in. Certainly, if I fail him in the weeks that lie ahead, then all will be over. God preserve us. Of course, I didn't know it then, but Lindsay was a celibate homosexual, I suppose. I used to ruminate with David Sherwin. I used to say, what do you think Linz is? Is he that way? I mean, he has plenty of women friends, but I've never seen him with a man either. And the truth was, of course, he was born in Bangalore in India. His father was a major general in the British Army, serving in India. So he had that sort of strict military upbringing. He was a sensitive child. Thought of him coming out as a homosexual was just absolutely a non-starter. So Lindsay fell in love with the people that were not attainable. He fell in love with I guess the people, that played the leads in his movies and his plays. And, I didn't know this. I hadn't got a clue, really, because it wasn't a physical thing. But of course, if I really look back, all these spats we had were like a damn marriage. I was like, my God. I mean, it used to drive me nuts. And I suppose this whole thing with Richard is the same thing. That he loved Richard, but of course, Richard certainly, I think, really used this fact. But I know that Richard loved him a lot. Even though he couldn't work with him and all the rest of it, there was no suggestion of that. Because at Lindsay's memorial, Richard showed up. He wasn't supposed to be there. He flew in from South Africa, and I saw him. I said, my God, you've got to come and say something. He went, Malcolm, it's all been said. I just wanted to be here for him. Another partner in the old crowd was John Gielgud. He was the greatest actor that I admired him so much. Of course, everyone admired Olivier, of course, and I did too. I remember going to see Olivier in all these great productions at the Vic. And in fact, when we were shooting I went to see Larry Olivier doing Day's Journey into Night. And in the middle of something, it was a long, talky scene. Of course, they all are, aren't they, in that play? But he suddenly, I'll tell you what he did. He suddenly, apropos of nothing, just went like this. The audience went nuts. I don't know why. It's just that physical thing. And so I thought, my God, what a brilliant thing to do. What are we shooting? Yeah, tomorrow. I could do a little something to zip that scene up. So I don't know what I did exactly, but I know it was quite ridiculous. In the middle of a scene, cut! What on earth are you doing, Malcolm? Well, I just thought that, no, that is ridiculous. What the hell why did you, well, I saw Olivia. Oh, Olivia, that old ham, for God's sake. Just do what you're supposed to do. Anyway, no such thing with John. John, I was very fortunate to work with John in the most horrendous movie called Caligula. But John loved it. He loved it. He came to me and said, I hear you've got a villa. I said, yes, John, I do. I'm staying in a villa. But they're not paying me very much per diem. Perhaps you could see fit to have me stay with you. I said, absolutely. I'd be thrilled if you would come. And he came and stayed with me for 3 weeks while he was shooting. I used to look down from my balcony and see him doing the Times crossword puzzle with his fedora hat and a deck chair and moving around to get out of the sun, And in the evening, he'd play Noel Coward. Mad dogs and Englishmen. I'll never forget him. I was going to the set on Caligula, and I had a train of 10 assistants holding up this ridiculous costume with the garland of whatever, and going to the set with O'Toole. And I see John at the end of a corridor like this. Oh, Malcolm, have you been to the set? I said, John, I'm just going to the set. Oh, I've never seen so much cock in all my life. I said, really? He said, oh, do tell me if you think they're pubescent or shaved. I said, John, I think they're all heroin addicts from the Piazza Navona. Oh, really? I think it's a frightfully good film. Lindsay was never content merely to assemble a cast to support a star performance. He had a way of directing star names that coaxed and nudged them beyond the bag of tricks that even the most talented star acquires over the years. He described the experience of directing Ralph Richardson in David Storey's play Early Days at the National Theatre as riding a rather difficult horse. And David has this recollection of Lindsay directing Gielgud in Home. "It isn't possible," said Gielgud, "for an actor to sit on stage without moving, Lindsay, for 25 minutes. Is it 25 minutes? Well, it feels like 25. Well, move in that case, John, move. Until a point had been reached. It's strange, but once sitting here, I don't feel I want to move again. Well, don't in that case. I shan't. David wrote this wonderful play called In Celebration, which Alan Bates did. In fact, if there was one person in this whole life of mine, this journey through this business, I would have to say he's the most adorable and lovely, it would be Alan Bates. In 1987, Lindsay called me and said, "What are you doing? Are you doing one of those awful films?" I said, "No, I've just finished doing an awful film." He said, "Why don't you come to New York and do In Celebration?" I said, "What? Which part?" He said, "Alan's part." I said, "Lindsay, I couldn't follow Alan Bates in that part. There's no way. Come over, we'll talk about it." So he said to me, "Now look, Malcolm, of course you can do it. What are you talking about? You telling me that only one person can play Hamlet? It's nonsense. I mean, you bring your quality to it, and Alan had his." What was Alan's? Jocular charm. What's mine? You're rather dangerous. Really? No charm? No jocular charm? No, not much. I see, okay. I'll do it then. We're doing the play, and it was at the Manhattan Theatre Club, and the audience were very much closer than this, and you were down at audience level, and they went up. I came on the stage, and I looked at the wonderful lady playing my mother, Pauline, and I could see that she had a strange look in her eye. So I knew something was up, and I wondered what it was, because I'm always game for a bit of fun. She sort of gave me that look, and then I heard a snoring, and I thought, my God, it's only been on 5 minutes, and there's somebody snoring. I thought, that's a bit much. Christ's sake. Well, I heard this snoring, and it was very peaceful. So we tried to go on. We did our thing. The other actor came in. I gave him an old-fashioned look, and he heard it. He looked around. I was on the sofa, and I got up and casually dropped a pillow right there, did a little walk around the sofa, and then just went, boom, kicked it, and missed the guy. So he slept all the way through to the damned interval. At the interval, I rushed to the assistant stage manager. I said, "Give me $10, quick." She gave me the money. I rushed out, walked out, woke the man up. I put the money in, and I said, "Listen, go home, get a cab, and go to bed, for Christ's sake. Go on, go to bed." The man was so startled, he got up. As he got up and left, the man right behind him was Steven Spielberg. I thought, oh my God. And I looked at him, and he looked at me, and I knew I would never work for that man. I'd broken that fourth wall. And I thought to myself, well, why the hell didn't he wake him up? Now we come to bourgeois. When David Showen once asked Lindsay to define epic, Lindsay said, "The epic is concerned with narrative structure, not decoration. Decoration is bourgeois." There was a very famous luncheon at Clive Donner's with his wife, Jocelyn Rickards. Clive Donner, who was a very good director, he directed me in a couple of things, but he's known for stuff like What's New, Pussycat, and those kind of films. He was married to a wonderful lady called Jocelyn Rickards, who was a costume designer of many, many great films. I worked with John Schlesinger a lot, did Sunday Bloody Sunday. In fact, she was an extraordinary woman. I used to love talking to her and stuff. She slept with just about every writer in London. John Osborne. Oh, yes, darling, I slept with him. Oh, really? Graham Greene? Lovely. Every single good writer, she seemed to have bagged the lot. So here was this luncheon that was really, I think, in honor of not only Lindsay, but of my then wife, Mary Steenburgen, and myself, because we just opened in a production of Holiday at the Old Vic, which Lindsay had directed. Now, at the luncheon were a wonderful choreographer called Eleanor Fazan, who we fondly called Fizz. She was one of the great choreographers, and she goes back to the early 60s. So Fizz is one of the most wonderful people in the London theatre scene and film scene that everybody knows, and we all love her. But then you had Mike Kaplan, who was the producer of Wales of August. So Mike was there because Wales of August had also been invited to Cannes. Lindsay just loved going back to Cannes. It's a real masochist for that. John Schlesinger and casting director Noel Davis. John Schlesinger is a very famous director. He directed Midnight Cowboy and, amongst other things, Sunday Bloody Sunday, An Englishman Abroad. He was a wonderful director. Of course, he was also at Oxford with Lindsay. And there was always a little bit of niggle going on there because Lindsay thought that John's films were sort of sellouts to Hollywood and wanted nothing to do with them. Of course, he would love to have had one Hollywood hit. And the same for John, who thought Lindsay was just that art director, you know, and could only do art films, which was pretty much true, actually. And Alan Bates, the star of this story. Lindsay was late for some reason, I don't know what it was, and the champagne was flowing. Oh, my God. Now, I had stopped drinking 5 years earlier or something, so I think I was about the only one who wasn't ripped. I don't think Mary was drunk either because she had a performance that night, so she was being rather careful. The food didn't come for hours. Lindsay arrived, and then he got sloshed. And anyway, we finally got to the table, and the dialogue was poisonous. There were barbs flying. I mean, it was unbelievable. John Schlesinger wasn't saying very much. Lindsay, of course, was doing most of the barb stuff. And he turned his attention, for some extraordinary reason, on Alan Bates, the nicest man in the world. First off, he said, Alan, why do you always wear those stupid scarves? Now, we all knew why Alan wore those scarves, because he had a double chin, right? No big deal. Of course, he was very uncomfortable about it. And if you see him in any picture, anything, it's always got one of those on. And I used to tease him about it. He'd go, you know, darling, I don't know. I mean, can you see it? I mean, is it there? I said, why don't you shade it? No, I think I can get it done. You know, nip and tuck. I said, don't bother. You know, really, Alan, are you crazy? You look great, you know, for an older guy. So Lindsay, barbs were flying out. And then he said to him, who was that dreadful director that you worked with 3 times? To Alan. And he goes, what do you mean? Who was it? A dreadful director, that bourgeois director. Alan Bridges, my God. Alan, so middle of the road. How could you, I mean...
At this point, Mary turned to Clive Donner and said, do all English artists speak to each other this way?
And then Lindsay started this game, and the game was, who would you rather have come through the door? Glenda Jackson or Joan Plowright? These two great ladies, their ears must have been burning. Anyway, Fizz, who'd said nothing all night, when Joan Plowright's name said, oh, she's so bourgeois, which Alan erupted, bourgeois, you bastards! You bastards! I'm leaving. You're all bourgeois. God, I'm so sick of you all. I am getting out of here. I am leaving. And he left. And I went, Jesus, I'm going after him. I'm going to get him back. I said, Alan, he's trying to find his coat. I said, Alan, for God's sake, they're all drunk. It doesn't mean a damn thing. Come on, come back. No, I've had it. I have had it with that Lindsay Anderson. I can understand. I know he's drunk, and he's, he gets so, his tongue is, oh my God, I know. Listen, forget it. He's drunk. No, I'm off. That's it. I never, ever want to talk to him again. He left. I go back in. Lindsay, you better apologize to Alan. He's really upset. Pass the wine. What? Oh, he'll get over it. He's old enough. He'll get over it. Lindsay, you've got to apologize. Next day, I get a call from Anna Massey. What happened at that luncheon? The whole of London in the theatre world is talking about it. I said, what? You're kidding. Why don't you call Lindsay and tell him to apologize? She went, I think I'll leave that one to you. I called him, said, Lindsay, please apologize to Alan. No, Malcolm, I never apologize. I never apologize. This went on for months. Please, Lindsay, have you spoken to Alan? No. No, I haven't. So as far as I knew, that was it. He never apologized. This is the letter of apology. June the 4th, 1987. My dear Alan, you will be surprised, I'm sure, and I hope gratified, by the number of times I've reproached myself for not getting in touch with you. Not for not phoning, because I'm really getting an aversion to the telephone, but for not writing. Because I'm sure you felt you were certainly owed an apology for that distressing, comic incident in which we were involved. When was it? It must have been months ago, and about which I felt sorry and guilty for ages. That sounds like a very sweet apology. I think in the first place, I must plead the excuse, though not the justification, of drunkenness. Clive and Jocelyn really did lace us with champagne, which reminds me, I've not written to thank them for their hospitality. Which inevitably led to impossible high spirits and runaway tongues. And of course, I was not at all expecting such a high-powered gathering, particularly the presence of John Schlesinger and Noel Davis, which inevitably created, to someone of my prickly and defensive sensibility, something of an insider-outsider atmosphere. So, naughtiness stimulated by alcohol, then, as I say, defensive aggressiveness exacerbated by that strong element of successful satisfaction by which I felt myself surrounded. Of course, you will feel it unjust that you should have been identified with any such element. And of course, you weren't really, except by the accident of your friendly, professional relationship with Alan Bridges. It's only another aspect of the comedy that I should be scornfully outraged by Bridges congratulating me at the first night of holiday on a first-class professional job. And that I should have it in for the aforesaid Bridges for having been awarded the Cannes Grand Prix, well, half of it, for a film I despised, The Hireling, in a year when we, and I'm including Malcolm in this, had unsuccessfully offered Oh Lucky Man. It is comic, too, I suppose, that Bridges' tasteful, passionless respectability, I'm talking subjectively, should somehow come briefly to symbolize the kind of art that could only arouse my contempt. The word bourgeois can always be relied on to inflame any discussion. I'm not sure, I didn't clearly hear how poor dear Fizz used it. Now she's getting blamed. I'm sure, inaccurately, she would have done much better to have kept out of, by now, the lacerating crossfire. Jocelyn, I seem to remember, was going great guns. John Schlesinger was wisely keeping very quiet. Anyway, Fizz interjected something which I'm sure was very silly. And you put an end to the nonsense by your abrupt and undesirable and probably wise departure. I'm sure that we, the smart, destructively tongued, malicious party, seemed to be, in the ascendant, the party of the stronger. The only thing I would like you to understand is that what you were experiencing, certainly as far as my malicious tongue was concerned,
was the defensive anger of dissidents in a complacently conforming world. Impotent dissidents because the conformists have won. Alan Bridges, to take the example of the moment, is never going to find himself ruled out of employment for non-conforming tastes or opinions, for being difficult or offensive, for being anything other than a first-class professional. 30 years ago, we could imagine ourselves actually changing things, winning the battle, or at least achieving the security of a sizable, mutually supportive minority. But the establishment won by the good old English ploy of assimilating, rather than attacking its attackers. It's not particularly nice to feel oneself perpetually forced into scorn, disapproval, outrage, rejection, both rejecting and rejected. I won't go on, and honestly, I'm not meaning to self-justify. So long as you understand all that happened at that fascinating lunch party was that you fell victim to the drunken vulnerability of one or two outsiders, momentarily, but only momentarily, in the ascendant. They behaved badly, they regret it, and I'm sure you forgive them. Cannes was horrible. Princess Diana, next to whom I had to sit, spent 3/5 of the Wales of August fiddling with an earring in her lap. Alan, I hope the play is going excellently and that you are getting as much enjoyment from it as you are giving, which I know will be a great deal. I do hope and I confidently expect you'll triumph at the Haymarket. Good luck always, Lindsay. An amazing footnote to that letter is that actually the Princess Diana did go to the premiere in Cannes. And she did sit there, as Lindsay said, fiddling with an earring. The NBC did a film about Princess Diana and the whole thing about her a year ago. And apparently, on the way in the car to the premiere, Prince Charles told Diana that Barry Manakee, her former lover, had been killed that day in a motorcycle accident. And I know that Lindsay said to Diana, "Have you ever thought of becoming an actress?" And she said, "I am an actress." Lindsay made a film in Maine called Wales of August, which was produced by my dear friend, Mike. And in fact, Mary was in the film. She played the young Lillian Gish. It starred Betty Davis, Lillian. And the amazing thing was that John Ford actually was from Maine. His name was Sean Feeney. And Lindsay went to some descendants of the Feeneys. They had a market called Feeney's Market, and he bought a baseball cap with Feeney's Market on it, and he wore it throughout the whole of the filming. This was one of the favorite pieces that he wrote. Betty arrived first. We were an hour and a half out of Portland, Maine, by the ferries which made the trip around the islands, or 40 minutes by water taxi, whose passengers were limited to 4 or 5. But the vessel which brought Betty Davis over from the mainland, I'd never seen before. It looked very large, almost threatening. Wide, white, high in the water, like a miniature ocean liner. They had forgotten the tides. The water was low, and Betty's vessel was too large, too high in the water to berth comfortably at the jetty. The gangway would not reach the landing. The tiny, potent figure in a smart black dress, the tiny hat perched on an exuberant hairdo, stood waiting impatiently on the deck. Everyone was indecisive, intimidated. "Come on," I yelled. "You'll have to lift her down." Hands reached forward for Betty. "Lift me down," she commanded. She was swung out and down, unperturbed. She talked. "My God, would you believe it? I just knew that was gonna happen. on the plane from New York, and I hadn't seen him in 14 years. Gary Merrill. I got on the plane and I looked around, and there the bastard was. Would you believe it?
Now, Betty had been married to Gary Merrill, who had been her leading man in All About Eve.
She cackled and tottered, still talking, as her feet touched the landing. Hold on, I urged. I just knew that would happen. The first time I've been back since we lived here, I told him to come forward and sit with me in first class, but he wouldn't. He looked pretty good. She ran on. Did I give her a welcome embrace? I can't remember. If I did, she took no notice. Mike came forward and smiled, his charming, officious smile. Good morning, Miss Davis. I'm Mike Fash, your cameraman. Betty showed interest. Hello, Mike. She was susceptible, one up to us. Lillian arrived the next day quite differently. She'd been somewhere out west attending a festival in honor of her beloved sister Dorothy. This time, there was no cabin cruiser. Lillian came by water taxi. She wore a useful Macintosh coat, a white scarf around her face, and a man's cap on top of it. She managed the steep gangway without difficulty. A knot of admirers applauded respectfully. Lillian waved. We drove to her bungalow, looking out over the bay, with its lovely view of the water, the sky, and the wooded islands. And she remarked, we shouldn't really be paid for enjoying all this beauty. One of the endless fascinations of this extraordinary star partnership was their absolute difference in everything except God-given talent and life-acquired professionalism. Lillian's reputation is angelic. Betty's is devilish. It did not take long for both to prove justified, provided one remembers that there's nothing soppy about an angel and that devilry can have its own peculiar charm. Neither of these two ladies had ever made concessions. Angels are strong. When we shot The Whales of August, Lillian's principles were exactly those with which she had performed in Birth of the Nation or The Wind. Her job was to serve the director and the script. This did not oblige her to transgress her standards of artistry or taste. If she did not like a line of dialogue, she would change it or cut it out, always with her director's permission, firmly requested and readily granted. I was particularly happy with one setup. Lillian was preparing for an evening visitor. The camera followed her around the room, setting out her clothes. Finding an old telegram of wartime loss. Sitting to read and remember as the Atlantic waves rolled in. I sensed that Lillian wasn't entirely pleased. I asked her why. She pointed out that she ended the shot in profile. For her, feeling was expressed through the eyes. But it's a lovely, expressive image, I said. Struck by a sudden inspiration, I added, remember Whistler's mother. Ah, yes, said Lillian, but think of the Mona Lisa. She had me there. Betty's method of conveying reservation was cruder. Contest rather than collaboration seemed for her to be the essence of the actress-director relationship. Rubbish! Or ridiculous idea would be her usual comment. That's twice I've given in to him today, she would announce to the unit in accepting an idea. I must be slipping. She liked to give directions herself, to push the furniture around, to bully some humble member of the crew. Only once was I driven to snap. You're not taking over this picture, Betty, I heard myself say. She stiffened in outrage and walked off the set. Both she and I called for the producer. It was quite exciting, just like old Hollywood. Betty had defeated a hysterectomy, a stroke, and a vengeful daughter. But she had no relish for the freedom of location shooting. "We should be doing this in a studio," she would grumble, remembering the days of old acquaintance, the letter, and now Voyager. Lillian had no such nostalgic thoughts. After all, she had lain for hours on a real ice floe, not in the studio tank, while Griffith shot her drifting towards the falls, her hand and long hair trailing in the icy water. Shrewd, as well as innocent, Lillian likes to repeat her mother's advice as to how most sensibly get through life. "You can be rude to people," she would say, "but you'll find things a great deal easier if you treat people well, with kindness and courtesy." And that's how Lillian does it. Betty's mother, on the other hand, surely gave her daughter no such counsel. Betty's impulse is to treat the world with hostility. She can be fearfully rude, often cruelly so. The sad thing is that this can make a splendid spectacle. Journalists love it, calling it feisty. Chat show hosts, they grow fat on it. In the Wales of August, they had the Doozer and the Bernhardt of the movies side by side, no holds barred. Ah, did you once see Shelley plain? Here they are. You can forget the rest. Kathy Burke typed all Lindsay's letters. This is one that I found I'd forgotten about, and remember this date, April the 12th, 1981. Dear Malcolm, Chariots of Fire and my double act with John Gielgud. I went to the show largely out of courtesy to my friend Hugh Hudson. But I wasn't invited into the presentation lineup, so I missed the chance of being presented to Her Majesty, together with 24 executives of 20th Century Fox, Hugh Hudson, David Putnam, Sylvia Emmanuel Cristal, Jenny Agutter, and John Gielgud. It really was an incredibly and embarrassing suburban affair. I've no idea what I'm like in the picture. When my first sequence arrived, I closed my eyes. Later, I peeked through half-closed lids. All I can say is I didn't seem to be much worse than Gielgud. I suppose they thought it a happy idea to confront the Queen Mother the moment the lights went down with images of her dead husband and assorted dead film stars, a morbid kind of jollity which only the English could have thought appropriate. Things are really crowding now. Britannia Hospital is set to start shooting at the beginning of August. The script has, I think, a splendid conception, some excellent invention, a few holes, and dialogue that could be improved. Recognize the pattern. Listen, Malcolm. You must let me know if there really is a possibility you'll be able to play in it. It's not a great central role, but it has some good, outrageous stuff, and you do end up as a transplant monster, clamping your teeth into Graham Crowden's hand and having your head pulled off in the ensuing melee. Please say yes, and I'll send you the script immediately. I had a late supper one evening with Treat Williams. Treat is really nice, an impressively generous fellow. We went for a trip in his plane around nighttime Manhattan. An incredible, somehow touching sight. I wonder why. All that energy, survival, struggle, creativity and corruption magically transformed into light, defying the darkness. We passed so close to the World Trade Center building that we could see the diners innocently enjoying themselves in the restaurant. And in the late 20th century, it's impossible not to see the whole great heart of the city as vulnerable, exposed to attack. In the summer of 1973, I was in Los Angeles for a few days in the middle of a publicity tour from Oh Lucky Man. The Warner Brothers publicity department asked me if there was anything I particularly wanted to do in Hollywood. When I said I would like to call on John Ford, I sensed a certain unease. I knew Ford wasn't well. I knew he had moved out to Palm Desert, but I wanted to call him. His telephone number was produced. To my surprise, it was the correct one. My friend, Marion Billings, who was shepherding me on my tour, put the call through from my room at the Beverly Hills Hotel. We both felt rather strange about it. I remember how she went pale and tottered slightly when she found out she was talking to John Ford. I took the phone. His voice was vigorous and welcoming, as though we'd met a month or two ago. "Hello, Lindsay. What are you doing in L.A.? I explained. I said I'd like to come and see him if it was at all possible. "Yeah, come on out. Be good to see you." I told him I was only in town over the weekend. "Well, I've got my lawyer coming out tomorrow. I've got some business to talk over with him. Can you make it Sunday? Anytime. Come out in the afternoon. You got the address?" It was difficult to believe he was dying of cancer. I drove out on Sunday afternoon in a large limousine provided by the studio. We stopped at a garage and asked the way to Old Prospector Trail. That was where Ford had come to make his last home. No sound, no breath of air broke the intense heat of the desert afternoon. Then there was a sound of an unlocking of the door, and it opened a little way, cautiously. I made out a middle-aged lady standing in some kind of shift or house dress, barefoot. I explained that I'd come to see Mr. Ford at his invitation. Barbara Ford, who had greeted me, introduced herself as Ford's daughter and asked me who I was. Her father had mentioned that a friend would be coming to see him, but had given her no details, and I realized that my name meant nothing to her. But she was very friendly. She padded back in her slippers and told me that her father was ready. "Could you tell me your name again?" "Daddy only said that he had an old friend from England coming," I told her. "Are you a filmmaker?" I said, "Sometimes." "Oh, Daddy didn't tell me anything about you, but he was determined to look smart." "It's the big one, you know," she said, and I knew she meant cancer. It's only a matter of time. He's had the last rites, and last week we thought he'd gone. He had a giant hemorrhage, and they rushed him into hospital in the middle of the night, but he fought his way out of it. He insisted on coming home. "What shall I call him?" I asked. I'd always found it impossible to address Ford as anything but Mr. Ford or Sir. Barbara seemed surprised. "Who, Daddy?" "Oh, call him Jack. That's what he likes to be called." We went down the passage and into a light, quite small room, mostly occupied by a bed. Ford lay there, propped up on pillows, smoking a cigar and drinking brandy. Revolver shots rang out from a portable TV set by his bed. Figures on the screen were chasing each other up and down a ship's gangway. "Hello, Lindsay," he said warmly. "Hello, Jack. It's good to see you." He looked gaunt and old. It was easy to see how disease had eaten into him. But the pugnacious, commanding spirit was still strong. It only took a moment to get used to his appearance, and then he looked much the same. It was easy to forget that he was fatally ill. I glanced at the TV screen. A bulky figure came clattering down a stairway, firing blanks at the deck above. "Is that Victor McLagan?" "No, Tommy Mitchell." Ford leaned across and switched off the set. "Some rubbish." Ford asked me what I was doing in L.A., and I gave him a copy of the book we'd produced of the Oh Lucky Man script. I missed that one of yours," he said, "but I enjoyed that football picture that you did." "Oh, did you see it?" I said, surprised. "Of course I did. Good picture." I couldn't help wondering if he'd really seen The Sporting Life. I couldn't think of any good reason why he should have. Well, not that it mattered, but I asked him if he'd been working on any projects, knowing that there'd been several in the last few years. "Oh, I had a couple of scripts," he said, "but I'm beyond that now. This has put a stop to all that. Haven't got the strength for it." He didn't say it bitterly. It was almost as though it were a truth he'd long avoided and now was glad to face. We chatted in a relaxed way. The send-up tone had gone, no need for that now. We had no great store of common experience and not much old acquaintance, but I knew that in a strange way, the fact of my visit mattered to him. I was glad. We talked a bit about picture making now and in the old days. He talked contemptuously as ever about producers. I asked him if there was anyone he liked working with. Oh, Zanuck. He knew the business. When I'd finished a picture, I could go off to Catalina on my boat and fish. I didn't have to hang around. I could leave the editing to him. None of the others knew a damn thing. I congratulated him on his award from the American Film Institute. The ceremony had been a few months back. The presentation had been made by Richard Nixon, and Jane Fonda had protested outside against his presence. Did they do it well? I asked. Oh, it was fine. A great occasion. The president made a speech. Of course, he didn't know much about it, but he did it very well. I was very touched. People had been to see him. Well, Hawks has been over a couple of times. He was here last week, and Hank Fonda. Nice man, Hank. Maureen O'Hara was on an island somewhere in the Pacific. He reserved his familiar caustic tone for John Wayne. Duke's up in Seattle, shooting some rubbish, playing a goddamn policeman. After 20 minutes or so, Barbara came back. Well, Jack, it was a piece of great luck that brought me out to California now, and I'm glad I could come to see you. His hand lay on the bed cover, freckled with age. I held it for a moment, then kissed it goodbye. Thanks for coming, said Ford. It's a long drive out. It was good of you to come. I turned at the door. Anything I can do for you in England? Oh, give Brian Hurst a call and tell him you saw me. Anything else you want? Only your friendship. You have that. I left him with his brandy glass and cigar stub. I called Barbara a couple of times during my American tour, and from Washington I sent him a postcard of Lincoln with his son Thad. 6 weeks later, back in London, I switched on the radio one morning and heard that John Ford had died. I was in my house in Italy when Mary called me and said, I'm sorry, Malk. I'm so sorry. And it's just one of those calls that one doesn't like to get. I said, what is it? What is it? She said, oh, haven't you heard? Lindsay is gone. So, of course, for me, it was such a great loss, for many of us. But I rushed he'd been at a friend's house in the Dordogne in France, to Lois Smith. Actually, it's sort of life is a circle, as they say. Lois Smith was a great friend of Lindsay who encouraged him and invited him, in fact, to make his very first film, a documentary about her then husband's engineering works. And he made 3 or 4 short documentaries for Lois. And he was at Lois's house in the Dordogne, swimming in a lake, very much like a Chekhov lake, with silver birch trees, no houses, nothing. They were just being mirrored in this beautiful lake. And apparently he was swimming in the lake. He got out. Lois got out. They went to change their clothes. Lindsay went up a bank. He had such a massive heart attack that threw him back 15 feet into the lake with his head submerged in the water. But the doctor said that he died before he hit the ground. So we went to that lake. I met Jocelyn Herbert there, and Jocelyn and I swam in the lake. And so that was the end of an era for me, to see this great man gone. But of course, he's not really gone, because the movies are there, and so are the memories. This is what David Storey wrote. Lindsay told David that he would like a line from a Yeats poem as his epitaph. A revolutionary soldier kneeling to be blessed fits him well, although, as Storey gently remarked, he didn't kneel for very long. One of my favorite stories about Lindsay is an occasion of Ben Travers, who was a wonderful playwright in London, his 90th birthday. Lindsay was directing one of his plays, Bed Before Yesterday. He went with Ben to the Circle of Critics at the Ivy restaurant in London. Now, these are all the critics that, of course, he loathed and he fought with through the years. They were fating, both of them. And first off, they asked Ben Travers what he would like on his tombstone. He stood up and said, "And now the fun begins." Then they asked Lindsay for his epitaph. And he looked round the room at every one of them, slowly, down that Roman nose, looking like a Roman senator. And he said, "Surrounded by fucking idiots."
valley they say you are leaving. We will miss your bright eyes and sweet smile. For they say you are taking the sunshine that has brightened our pathways a while. You remember Henry Fonda singing that to Jane Darwell in The Grapes of Wrath?